Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today for how access controls can prevent higher education from unwanted surprises. I'm delighted to be joined by Jeff Admonius from Mastek today, along with our very own CEO SafePaaS at SafePaaS, Adil, and they'll be discussing the challenges that higher ed face in today's current landscapes and how you can overcome them. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. The session will be recorded for reference and on-demand viewing afterwards. And we will leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end of the session. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop those across in the control panel. So this is the agenda we will be following today. Why are we all here today? Why are we hosting this session? How to build an effective internal controls framework, how controls can not only mitigate risk, but propel you forwards, and then solutions and a case study towards the end of the session. So Jeff, Adil, if you'd like to briefly introduce SafePaaS, and then I'll hand it over to you, Jeff, and you can dive into the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome, Jeff, and welcome everybody attending. It's a really timely topic. We're talking to a number of our higher ed customers that are interested in improving their access governance to get ready for the new year as cyber threats continue to bog down operations and IT folks. So yeah, just quickly on SafePaaS, most of you know who we are, but on this call, but basically what we stand for is the governance as a governance platform that enables customers to prevent risk in their businesses and detect risk and so forth. So to accomplish that, we have built this platform on a solid foundation that is SOC verified. It's got almost 6 million users on it now, which makes us from what I've been told, the largest platform on the internet for access governance. And we apply all the modern fault tolerant and technology to make sure that system stays up. And it's monitored and secure 24/7. So it's a really solid platform. If you're looking to go on and build a solution, this may be one of the options to consider because obviously it's more scalable, secure, and so forth. We also integrate into all major platforms that customers, especially in higher ed, use to control the risk in their business. So what's popular in higher ed, for example, is PeopleSoft and Workday and those kinds of systems. There's also, we worked with Cash Edge, which is a campus payment solution, and many other systems that are used on campus to ensure smooth operations, right? We've been recognized by Gartner and all major audit firms that either use SafePaaS or audit their customers using the input from SafePaaS. So we've been around for a long time and have just in the management team over 100 years of experience. I alone have about 20 years in this industry. Written book with Oracle security folks called the Governance, Risk, and Compliance Handbook for Oracle, and many other white papers and ebooks that are available online on our website. So please take a look at that. So that's a quick overview of SafePaaS. Jeff?
Thanks, Adil. Hi, folks. This is Jeff Admonius. I lead the education and government practice for Mastek, Inc. And we're real happy to be here today speaking with Adil and with the SafePaaS folks. I have been with Mastek for about 3 years, and prior to that, about 20 years in the industry with Oracle. And the majority of that time, I've been working with higher education as one of the markets that I worked in. Probably have been inside about 100 to 150 different universities and colleges across the country. And wanted to talk a little bit about who Mastek is, as well as a little bit about the topic of governance and fraud in the market. So Mastek, many of you may not have heard of our organization, but we've actually been in business for over 40 years. and we've got a global workforce of about 5,000 employees, so pretty substantial company. One of the keys about our organizations, we've actually done over 1,400 cloud implementations, and about 130 of those within the higher education and public sector space. I think that you'd find that is a very large number within the consulting market as far as for cloud implementation. We've also had a lot of impact. We have impacted millions of citizens through our some of our custom solutions, actually, around fraud detection, legal immigration, and things that we do for governments, as well as more than 1 million stakeholders that have been impacted through some various public initiatives that we've done through our student partnership called Deep Blue. So we basically have partnered with about 1,000 students in developing these programs to go and try to solve some of the big problems out in the public. Our organization has pretty broad coverage of solutions, whether that's customer experience on the front end, both cloud front and back end solutions, digital engineering or custom development, our innovation labs where we bring some of the latest technology to bear on your business problems, data, reporting, artificial intelligence, and finally support for all of those solutions. As part of our work, we've developed a transformation process called Glide. We're in our 4th iteration of Glide, which is really focused on being a business or industry-based solution for moving your on-premise applications, whether it's EBS, PeopleSoft, SAP, or Banner, to the Oracle Cloud. We're really proud of our partnerships, both with Oracle as Platinum Partner and Salesforce as Summit Level Partner. And we're also really, really proud of being named as one of the top 20 global implementers in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for the last four years. So really proud, really excited about that. And hopefully you have a better idea of who Mastek is and will know us going forward. Next. Next slide. So, the big picture of what we're talking about today is, I think everyone has seen the headlines, right? A recent one here in 2022, an incident of fraud at Yale Department of Emergency Medicine, more than $40 million defrauded out of the university. Accounting errors, that have more than a $20 million impact in Australia. Charges raised in the university in Texas for financial schemes that take money out of the university. And then stolen funds and employees stealing funds out of the University of Missouri. These are the headlines, and you probably all, being in the higher ed industry, have all noticed these headlines. But actually, if we go to the next slide, it actually gets worse. We can go ahead and build this out. So actually, the total loss in all industries, there was a study by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. For all industries, total fraud was about $7 billion between 2016 and 17. And at least 70 million of that was in higher education. But that's only what was reported. It's actually worse. Only about half of all fraud is even reported. So, these are significant numbers. And, the median loss is about $68,000, and with various schemes, corruption or basically using influence to make money off of financial transactions with the university, or billing schemes where you bill for some product or service but have the funds routed to your own accounts. And sadly, what's even worse is typically it's folks who have been with your organization more than 5 years that are the biggest risk, because those losses associated with folks who've been around the organization longer are much larger. Next slide. So how does this happen? I think it's a combination of things, and while it's not only an issue within higher education, and all industries have these type of challenges, I think higher education as a market has some of these are even more exacerbated within higher education. Weak control environments. I think some of that some of this, I think, goes to sometimes the distributed nature of work within higher education institutions. You have different colleges, different departments, things are spread out, and there may not always be a clear control over the accounting and the financial services across the organization. You know, certainly over the last couple of years and even prior to that, impacts on staffing, whether it's, resources and budget cuts and resources being lost or being laid off through periods of time, has made that problem worse with less oversight. And also the challenges of segregation of duties across those kind of diverse environments. A lot of times approvals may be more of a rubber stamp just getting through, and there may not be clear asset management across all departments, colleges, or even major projects within the university. A lot of times, even if there are policies and procedures and they're not fully communicated, we may have folks in and out of the organization, and it may not be clear what those policies are or if they're enforced. And the reporting structure being siloed among different colleges within the university can make it harder to track what's happening with the finances. So that gives you a bit of the picture of what some of the challenges are, what the size and the impact of these problems are. I'm going to hand it over to Adil now, and he can start to talk about what are some of the solutions that are available to address this.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for that insight. So from a SafePaaS perspective, where we can bring value here is really help you understand the internal controls framework that has been adopted widely by many industries, including education, higher education. So this is a framework that's been around for a long time. I became more involved with it when Sarbanes-Oxley became a law. I was actually running a U.S. listed public company on Mastek at the time, and my auditors, Deloitte, came and said this is the new framework for disclosure. And since then, it has become the industry standard for higher ed and many other industries, right? And so basically, this framework is well proven, real world tested, and your auditors, the major audit firms that I referred earlier in the introduction, all are expecting you to have these controls. In my experience working with universities, I've met some really bright, heads of departments that really understand the concept of controls at the high level, but when it comes down to how those controls are audited and how, why fraud occurs, as the examples that were just shared by Jeff, that's where people are scratching their heads. They're saying, we have some of the smartest people working in our groups, and why are we having this problem? And a lot of the challenges that Jeff laid out can be addressed through a framework. And I'm not saying this is the only framework, it's just the most widely used framework. That's what companies are audited against around the world. But there are many other frameworks. There's an ISO 31000 framework. There's specific IT level frameworks that we work ourselves are bound by that, like ITIL or COBIT. But I wanted to keep the conversation at the level that you can drill into where you want to take it. So the controlled environment is the concept of having an environment that, starting with a tone at the top, that your people at the top of the company are doing the right things and they're setting the right examples on how they will follow their own company policies and ethical guidelines and the core values that the organization has. So that's where it starts, right? Then you hire people in the organization that abide by those values, and you hire competent people to do their job, which is hard to do these days. People have a lot of options where they want to go work for, and we're lucky to find people to come and work in any company right now. Same applies to higher ed. And then having a delegation of authority, structure, roles and responsibilities are well defined, policies are written and followed. So that creates a controlled environment that higher ed can benefit from. Now, most higher eds have that in place. So the question is, what can you do better, right? It's the It's the enforcement of that. It's the operationalization to make that all sustainable. I've seen a lot of three-ring binders in my days over the last 20 years where they're well-meant, well-written procedures and policies that were developed sometime decades ago, and they're part of your training program, onboarding program. But somehow, when push comes to shove, as Jeff just indicated, one of the challenges, people want to get the job done, and they would sometimes rubber stamp approvals, as an example, or share passwords, or give over too much access to people that probably shouldn't have that much access. So that's where risk assessment comes in, and that's the second layer. I think of these things as lines of defense, right? So you've created an organization culture, the tone at the top, the processes, the policies. That's your framework for your governance you've already created, and that's what your internal control framework begins with. But then you have to test it. How are we doing against those ambitious goals we have, those policies that are sitting in three-ring binders? So you perform some sort of an assessment there with objectives in mind. In case of higher ed, I've had experience being part of those assessment teams at a number of top universities in the US, and I have a case they talk about, an example later on, specifically around risk assessment. And so what that means is that basically going and testing those policies and controls. And that's where I start to see, especially in higher ed with lack of large internal audit organizations, or even that centralized controls, because each department, as Jeff was saying, has its own sort of groups, and most average or larger universities in the US, right? So what you see is that the design is good, the control design is well done, but it hasn't been updated for a long time. And when the controls are being tested, they're tested by in an informal way. So one thing we have learned in the audit world is that an operational effectiveness of a control is tested by being able to perform that control independently. What that means is that your external auditors can come in, read a control design document, and then follow that operation of that control to ensure that control is effective. And that's where you identify risks, right? So if you find that, in terms of three-way match, which is a common procure-to-pay control, if that is your control, but that you don't pay invoices until the receipts match the PO to the invoice, or you pay within a small tolerance level, but people are paying invoices and the process is not being followed, that's what creates the risk in the business. It's a very formal process. All the big fours perform that services for higher ed. Many internal audit organizations within higher ed can do it themselves and then share the results of their sample size, their randomization, and their methodology essentially with the external auditor. So that's where I started to see that there are some rooms for improvement even at the best of the best universities out there, just because of the pressure to get done more with less, especially in the last few years as we have gone into this hybrid world, where we work sometimes in the office, sometimes from home, and all that stuff. Next is, so once you've done the assessment, then you start looking at control activities, and these are essentially the activities you perform as the process is happening, ideally, right? So I picked the example of procure-to-pay cycle, which means that you may have activities on how do you set up a new supplier. So you want to set up a new supplier, how do you check their background? How do you do their credit checks? How do you set up their personnel? Do you right now, what's really important to universities and higher ed is being able to do third-party verification, not only on the typical financial stability, but also IT risks, right? For example, we've all heard about the stories of where, companies getting infected by patches that come in from a third-party IT provider, right? So all of those are control activities that must be verified and ensure that they're happening, right? So if the control activities are not happening, your control environment is not successful, because even though it says that you do a three-way match, it's not actually happening. That's an example of control activity creating opportunity for fraud or waste or errors in the business, right? The purple element there talks about information and communication. So once you get control over your control activities, in other words, your processes are operating with all the controls in place and people are executing based on their roles and responsibilities, then you look at also the layer around communication and information. So this is gets into, how are you disclosing information? How are you communicating internally as well as externally? So you have good methods for report fraud, who reports what fraud where, by department, by overall university level. And so all of those channels have to be pre-established and be in place and tested, right? Just like everything else, to make sure they're operating effectively. There are external disclosure issues that we have seen in the news articles that Jeff shared with us, where the disclosure is not only something that gets in the paper because it leaks out, it's a requirement to disclose any deficiencies of your control to your stakeholders. Many successful universities in the US, the top universities, have these obligations because it's written into their contracts for grants. So you take a big, huge portion of your R&D come from the grants that are given to the top universities and all major universities in the US by the industry to do research and development work. But they come with those conditions that you have disclosure requirements. So if you don't meet those requirements, you're going to lose the grant, which is a big setback in your ability to succeed. And then there's monitoring activities, last but not least. This is about doing it on an ongoing basis. What I find in universities with limited budgets and so forth, that it's happening in a reactive way, right? So reactive way means that your auditors come in, they find something that's wrong, they call it findings, and then you go fix it. That may be too late because damage may have already been done and reputational risk may have already occurred. So by monitoring, what we mean is doing that at a frequency that's suitable for the control. So not everything gets monitored daily. Some financial close items may get monitored once a month. Transactions like payments and so forth may get monitored on demand or every day. So you have this framework that guides you. And once you build this framework, which in many cases, universities have pieces of this framework. Sometimes it's on spreadsheets and Word documents and SharePoints, and it's hard to follow, which creates a lot of confusion. So what we're going to talk a little bit later in this session is how do you streamline and take advantage of the latest and greatest technologies that are available to you at reasonable costs and high ROIs to accomplish that, and we'll share some examples with you. So that's in a nutshell what you can take from this session to assess where you are in your maturity level around an internal controls framework. Whether you use this example or some other, be good for you to go back and assess your internal controls environment, how well you're doing, and I can give you a maturity model where companies are informal to all the way to optimized, right? So you go from informal to formal and onwards. Next slide. So here an example of a kind of a more optimized view of the procure to pay cycle, where your processes and decisions are data driven. So when you move from that informal to a formal to maybe a kind of a structured approach to a really an optimized state, you want to create these feedback loops, as I said, of not only having all the controls in place, but also having that continuous monitoring capability around your key processes. So we picked the procure to pay cycle here. So you can see that business risks are being defined in that very first silo, where you are looking for unapproved or illegal suppliers, maybe suppliers with known risks of cyber attacks or other difficulties, financial and so forth. You're also looking for supplier relationships, their consistency. So whatever those criteria are, you are checking those business risks on a basis today, right? So these are things that you already have in place, right? What the systems and technologies can do, where Jeff and I can help you, is really talk about what are your objectives and how are they embedded into your business, right? So maybe you have control objectives in that second swim lane that, hey, we want to capture all the discounts. When we pay invoices 210 net 30, we want to take that 2%, not forget to do that. We are maintaining the right bank accounts, as I mentioned. You know, we don't have the risk of somebody changing a bank account on our supplier because we bring in a contractor that changed some value in our supplier. Now the payment is going to the contractor instead of the supplier. Valid invoices, the three-way match piece I talked about. Purchase orders are approved by the right people, so it's not rubber stamp approvals. And today that's happening in your ERP system. If not, you talk to Jeff. He can help you upgrade your ERP system, right? So these are things that we expect our customers to be automating today from a controls perspective. If you're doing it manually, that alone becomes a risk. And many of the audit firms will simply write you up for the findings that you don't have enough controls around the process just because of the manual nature of that. So once you have these control objectives in place, and now you're performing these control activities, that brings me to this third silo, which is the monitoring of these activities in an automated world. So in the old world, we would go and look for 25 POs from purchasing, then we go to payables and look for 25 invoices, then we go to shipping and receiving and get 25 receipts, and we will sit down and match that. Those days are long gone, we all know that, but that's where this all started. Now it's about, you know, real-time agile business. Whether you're higher ed or a commercial business or a government agency, you all have to do business in real time to meet your goals. And so what we are offering, what our customers, leading customers are doing, they're embedding all of that controls monitoring into their operations. So the systems are now smart enough where we can detect duplicate invoices. And what does that mean? Of course, you can't put in duplicates in Oracle, it's a database. So if you put in same invoice number twice, it's gonna say, no, I can't do that. But that's not how ERP systems work. They have complex logic. So if you have the same invoice number, you can put a -A at the end of the day and put end of the invoice number. You can put in a different amount, slightly different. And sometimes people just do that because they want to go home and be with the family and they just can't figure out this darn ERP system because they're new at the job or they've just upgraded an ERP, they don't have enough training, or many other reasons, right? Reorgs and so forth. So you can fool the system, right? As long as you put something after it. So SafePaaS, where we come in is we're monitoring that process and we're catching those things and then stopping that from becoming a bigger problem, a reputational risk, or ending up in the news like we saw earlier from Jeff. Same thing we can apply to all of your control objectives. A typical customer, higher ed customer, has, I would say, between 15 to 25 of such monitoring controls just in their procure to pay cycle. And that makes their life easier, but also it saves you millions of dollars. You may be losing in discounts, you may be losing in overpayments that are very hard to collect, especially from one-off vendors. So all of that is now happening in real time. So instead of chasing the paper or running spreadsheets or downloading reports or building custom reports, you are monitoring incidents. An incident is basically a violation of your rule or a policy. So as I mentioned in the beginning, SafePaaS is all about governing the business based on policies. So now those policies have become alive, your controls are alive, and when the risk occurs in your procure to pay cycle, it goes out there all the way to even put a hold on the invoice automatically. So instead of looking at hundreds of incidents each month or each week, depending on your volume, now you're simply looking at high risk results out of the procure to pay cycle, and you have business owners and control owners focusing on how to prevent that risk and maybe removing some false positives or making exceptions. You know, a CFO comes down and says, hey, we just signed this major agreement with McKinsey. We're doing analysis on our growth potential for certain types of students. How can we do that? So they need a check today. And anyways, there's legal settlement. So there are exceptions that we hear about in procure to pay cycles. So we can manage those as well, right? But now you've streamlined that and you've taken that controls framework. And in this instance of just for the procure to pay cycle, you have improved risk assessment, you have improved control activities, you have automated controls monitoring, obviously you have improved information and communication. So starting with your big goal of creating a framework, having that controlled environment, at the top, you have taken all the rest of those pieces of the framework and streamlined and automated those so that you can focus on your day jobs and really be proactive with your controls monitoring. Next slide. So as you think about these benefits, how do our customers justify those as business drivers to move forward? As we said earlier, it's hard to get budgets for anything, especially higher ed. So this requires some work, and there are some hints we can leave you with. Each of you are in a unique position, but I'll talk through some of the common things that our higher ed clients have used to justify controls management, controls automation, and even ERP upgrade, like Jeff's going to talk about. So first thing is, it's pretty obvious, right? It reduces fraud because guess what? Once the money leaves the bank, it's very hard to get it back, whether you have to sue people or first of all, find them. Maybe they're sitting in some other country and this was done through some, scheme through inserting some software in your business or taking over a rogue account or violating an insider threat or whatever that is. So it reduces fraud. And so you can do, to basically take the slide that Jeff just shared, apply that to your business, and the fraud in your business that has occurred. If not, you can check with your CFO or the audit folks, and they'll give you that answer. The second thing, moving from top left to right, is the increased efficiency, right? So you notice that instead of doing those manual risk assessments or pulling purchase orders and matching them with invoices and receipts, your system is doing it for you. So you're focusing more on the incidence of risk assessments, findings, if you want to use that term, as opposed to performing the function to actually gather data. Also, you're not waiting for this to be discovered by external auditors. You are proactive, which, by the way, improves your compliance, right? So you have fiduciary responsibility as a higher ed when you take funds from for grants and other donations that come in to follow those compliance guidelines that are in those contracts. So you have to comply with them. You also have state and national guidelines that are specific for higher ed that apply depending on which state you are in. So those are all now being met because you have the evidence that controls are operating effectively, right? So you're not overstating or understating your liabilities or your assets, et cetera, right? So that solves your problem of compliance. And compliance gets ignored because compliance is really pushed out to the managers, and many times managers are required to certify. So each department had to certify that they're complying with the policies that are enforced by the state or the federal. And now you can they can certify with confidence because they actually have data to look at on what happened. So if there is a finding or there's an issue that's an exception, they can bring it up before the compliance auditors come in and embarrass you with it, right? So there's value in that. The reputational risk you're obviously controlling there as well, and that's the driver for our customers. Moving down to the second row, increased cost efficiencies. I think that's a no-brainer from what I've said. So because it's happening in an automated way, those increased efficiencies are reducing your cost. Security is a big deal, right? So we hear a lot about insider threats. There's actually a blog on our site and a resource if you want to read more about it that gets into the details of it. But that insider threat is a big impact to your reputation, as the stories we just heard, as well as the way it happens is because, especially in higher ed, I don't want to like single that out. It happens in other industries too, like high tech, where access is granted based on more informal requests. What we're seeing in a more structured settings is where industries are moving to a very scrubbed user access request management process. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of that happening in universities, and that's a key source of security risks as universities, because obviously everybody wants all access. University by higher ed is by itself. One CFO told me one time at a higher ed, we are about open minds. Everything is open here, so we gladly give people whatever they ask for. And my answer was, yeah, that's great when you're doing research, right? and that's a great part of your culture. But when it comes to giving keys to the kingdom, you have to put some security around it, even if you're a open-minded higher ed, and that's part of your mission. So provisioning users is a big problem. People get more access than they need, and sometimes they need it only for a day, but they've been given access that never gets taken away. And that is the single biggest source of insider threats that I've seen, because that's what your external actors are looking at as well, to come in and find those keys to the kingdom through a dormant account that somebody had access a year ago, but they have left and the access is still dangling out there. You know, what I find is the employee records don't always match the user records. You know, there's a gap. You have more access in users and less employees. So that creates a risk. And that's an opportunity for bad actors to come in and hijack those accounts. A continuous monitoring is important because that moves you from that reactive world to a proactive world. So what does that mean to you in terms of business drivers? So let's say you have, you know, you leave your car open, door open, you don't lock it. There's higher risk that somebody will come in and break in and walk out with your car or radio in there, whatever that is, right? But if you lock it, you know, it's secure. So same thing, continuous monitor prevents that from happening, because we're monitoring, you know, duplicate invoice payments going out. We're monitoring three-way matches happening. We're monitoring supplier bank accounts aren't changing. We're essentially preventing from, it's like a lock. We're preventing somebody to come in and take advantage of your system, whether it's an insider or an outsider threat. And so as the risk goes down and you put a value on that, so let's say you lose, you know, 2%, which is typical in certain industries, of your top line to risk every year. And if continuous monitoring can reduce that by 1% of your intake, you know, what does that mean? So in many universities that I worked with, that's multi-million-dollar savings, right? If you sit down and review, you know, your losses each year to risk. So continuous monitoring is a great driver. So take a look at these drivers. You may have your specific ones as well, and please reach out to us and we help you put together a business justification for putting a framework and then automating that framework of internal controls.
Yeah, Adil, I can back you up on this as well. You know, about a third of the time we're going into customers post-implementation and reviewing what's in place. And almost every time we do that, we do find roles and responsibilities set up with broad responsibilities across the application. And it could be that they set it up that way for implementation to facilitate being able to do the implementation, but they never go away. And not only does that increase their fraud risk, it also can increase their cost of their licensing for the software itself, because basically they're paying for each of those roles. And you know, by examining that and you know, doing more of a best practice around roles and responsibilities, they can save both license costs as well as reduce their risk.
Absolutely, great example. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what can we do to prevent this. So monitoring is one example. So you start with policies. We're going to focus on today around access governance. That's sort of the topic. So in case of access governance, you have to have really good policies on, you know, what are segregation of duties and what are high-risk privileges. Jeff said, you know, found that many universities still have it. So by starting with policy, a good point. The good news is that most of you have it. Higher ed is great. The mature institutions that I worked with have policies you can imagine, right? It's the challenge that policies have, and what I've seen is that they're not detailed enough. So policy may say, we don't want people to create suppliers and pay suppliers. That's a great policy. Of course, nobody wants that. And that's a policy you've written up somewhere. The challenge is when you get into these complex ERP systems, especially some of the legacy systems where, you know, Jeff and his company can help you move forward. These systems were built, you know, many of them in the 80s, right? And you may still be using them because they've been working fine. But what's happening now is that as the cyber threats are growing and as these bad actors are coming in, targeting higher ed to go take advantage of their funds, insider threats are increasing, compliance is becoming a bigger challenge. those policies aren't effective. They're just written up policies, but your business is happening in Oracle, business is happening in SAP. How are you controlling that? So now you've got to have real good expertise in building those right roles, rebuilding them. I've seen customers spend millions of dollars in redoing this. It's almost cheaper to go to a new ERP system than rebuild it, right? And that may be a case that Jeff can talk to you more about. But what we find is those policies have to be done at the granular level. They have to be done, if you're using a PeopleSoft system, it's the permissions and privileges on pages, right? That level, because we know that in PeopleSoft you can change that. Same thing if you're using Workday or if you're using Oracle, you have to go down to that level. So you have to have the skill sets, you have to go through it, and not to mention the impact on your business, right? Because now you're gonna tell a bunch of department heads that, hey, you can't approve the grants anymore on these projects. We're upgrading what you can do in your accounting system, on your procurement system. So it becomes challenging, and that's why policies have to be revised. The other thing I noticed is sometimes there are too many policies, right? So we take, not all risk is the same. One thing that any risk professional will tell you is to take a approach based on likelihood, impact, velocity, other parameters, and rate your risk, right? Don't just consider every risk. If there's $100 in my petty cash and I'm spending $1,000 protecting it, I'm not really doing my university any favors, right? So you have to think about policies, which ones to select, which ones to automate. And that's where policy access lifecycle management becomes really important, because it has to be part of the entire life cycle of your identity management solution. So you're using, let's say, Azure, using Okta, or the other identity systems, you're granting access into your assets, your information assets through these items, through these, but the policies are not applied. So I can come into university and, as a contractor, and say, hey, I need access to general ledger, I need access to payables, procurement, I get it all because I have a very efficient IAM system, but nobody checks my policies because they're hard to eyeball, systems and campus solutions and Cache Edge and PeopleSoft, 3 different systems. How do I eyeball that? I can't, humanly possible. Each of those systems have thousands of entry points. So people just grant access, right? And that creates a big problem, because now that access is given, people think it's their entitled right, inherent right to work, to do that. And pretty soon you find out that that's what created the problem of how somebody was able to buy laptops at Yale and sell them on the open market, because she had too much access, right? So that's where policy prevents those kinds of news in the media. Then periodic access reviews, right? So first of all, you prevent it. You don't give people too much access, give them access they need. But as we know that sometimes during implementation, people get more access, and we think it's going to be going away, but let's say it didn't go away, which is, by the way, always the case, as Jeff just mentioned as well. So now you've got to do this review on a periodic basis. We recommend at least quarterly. Most universities I talk to do it maybe semi-annual or annually, which is not enough, I think. Quarterly gives you enough time because it ties with your quarter ends. So do that review, right? And you'll find, I assure you'll find, things like you're paying more for licenses, to pick on Jeff's point. You're also giving people access they shouldn't have. And that review process is not that simple. So you think that I'm just going to download my user listing and roles and set in a spreadsheet to each of the department heads. Not going to happen, because guess what's happened in the last 10 years? You don't just have one system. You don't have a mainframe. You don't have just one ERP. People are logging into all kinds of systems that have bits of information that's all integrated to make your organization work, to make your higher ed or institution work. So you have the Cache Edge posting journal entries about what student cash is coming in. You have a grant system that's posting journal entries into GL. There are interfaces coming in. You have a procurement system. Maybe you want Coupa or some other new age procurement system that's a bolt-on. You have an HR system that has payroll information. So now, and then you have a provisioning system. So now people are using, let's say, ServiceNow, So let's say you have a catalog of roles, but they're matching those roles that you have are actually abstract roles that people don't know what privileges are tied to it. So now you have to go down to the privilege level, and that's months and months of effort, and that's why it's not happening, and it's creating continued exposure and risk for the company. The last point I would make is privileged access management, right? This is your support staff, your tech experts, your super users, we used to call them back in the day, that are given trusted and given waivers to do more things than an average user, right? So they go in the back of the application and change the setup. They can change the approval hierarchy on purchase order approvals, because university decided that every department head can now approve up to $1 million instead of $500,000, right? So these are the people that can do that. But then when they're in there, they could also change their own approval hierarchy, right? You don't know that. So being able to monitor activities that your IT folks, your support staff, your basically people with privileged access can perform, you need to track that, and that's a common problem that gets caught in audits and usually results in major effort, and then tracing everything back, looking back, what happened, what did this person do, and not that, it just takes a lot of your time away, doing remediation and mitigation that you can prevent through risk management. So those are the 4 points that I've made here on where you can move forward immediately once you implement a controls framework and automate it.
Yeah, the next few slides are the flows. So do you want to go through these really quickly, or should we move on to the case study?
I could pick like one or two, since I've talked a lot about segregation of duties. Maybe we can do this one and then move to the case study.
Okay.
So yeah, so where do you start, right? So if you're thinking, okay, I think I can get a business case and I'm ready to, consider something like that. What does it cost, and timeline? I don't have resources. Where do we even start? So it's a pretty straightforward journey, and we won't have time to cover all of them, as Emma indicated. But let me just walk you through the first one with the swim lanes. So the first thing, let's say you're worried about, is your current policies being automated, right? And first thing you want to do is pick the policies. So again, you don't have to boil the ocean and pick all 1,000 policies. Start with maybe a handful that are really important to you. High risk, we call it in the business, right? So let's say your top 25 policies may be around your procure to pay cycle, which is where all the exposure is right now at higher ed. Maybe it's record to report. Maybe it's a grants process. Maybe it's campus solutions. Some of those policies will be more important to you. So pick those handful of policies and then connect it to the cloud. Let's say you're using Cloud ERP or SafePaaS. We can collect to on-premise too. So using PeopleSoft on-premise, you connect to that, SAP, whatever. And so you connect those that system together. That's what your IS security would do. Your audit and compliance folks will pick out the policy. So that's your first swim lane. It takes about a week or two to agree on that. Depends on your, of course, size and your decision making and all that. So pretty quickly you're ready to go, right? And then you run the analysis against your data sources. And let's say you're working with Jeff and his company, and they're just implemented or just signed to implement Cloud ERP, right? So we could work with Cloud ERP as an example and pull in the current configurations of security model and apply our policies against that to produce an analysis of results or findings through an automated process. So it'll go through traverse through the roles, responsibilities, inherited roles and privileges, data security, all of those components of a security model. And we have all the security models on our website again, so I won't go through those here. It'll go and analyze and it'll produce results. And what you'll find is they're in tens of thousands, right? And people roll their eyes first time they see it. It's like, why is that? Well, it's because each user has multiple roles. Let's say each user have 5 roles. 5 roles have, let's say, 5 violations of policies, 5 rules are violated, and there are 5 privileges that are violated. So you multiply, that 5 times 5 times 5, and let's say you have 500 users in the system, you're going to end up with, I did the math the other day, 62,000 or more issues, right? So now you got a lot of analysis to do, and you need a system to do that. You need a purpose-built system. Your BI systems are not built for that because they're built for reporting, not finding exceptions, because you have false positives, you have, compensating controls, you have mitigation, etc. And I won't have time to go in that, but all of that is part of the analysis. And then you are left with something called corrective actions, and that's how you go and work with Jeff and his team to, fix the roles in Cloud ERP or whatever your ERP system is, and deploy those in their ERP system. And that's where Mastek and EvoSys before that, we worked with these guys to really make sure that your systems are solid and secure by providing the input from SafePaaS into those corrective actions. And then managed services, connection, other things that Jeff's company does, they can help you manage and maintain this moving forward as well. So the Oracle sends their quarterly patches, or if you're on-premise still, you're doing your patching, all of that requires review. And that's where partners that have a lot of experience in this area can offer a lot of benefits to you. Jeff, would you like to add anything before we move forward?
Well, I think what's really attractive about the process that you're describing is comparing it to the alternative. So
right.
I have been involved where we've done that kind of remediation without this type of tool. So now you're back to the world's favorite tool, Excel.
Yeah.
And pivot tables and filters. So you can imagine if you've got those 62,000 examples within your list, that is a very, very time-consuming approach.
Right, exactly. That's where these things get bogged down and, quite frankly, fail in many cases. Okay, let's move on.
I'm going to skip over the next few flows so we can go into the case study. And obviously, if anyone wants a copy of the deck, then reach out to me and we can, send some explanations over with those. So let's go through the case study.
Yeah, this is an example of a organization, a higher ed or institution that I worked with on the West Coast. It's a leading research and teaching university that is ranked among the top in the world, and really had the honor of assisting them in their internal controls folks with. So a lot of my example that I was using, already covered these pain points that apply to a lot of our higher ed customers, but specifically in this case, we found that most of the internal controls were manual, right? And some controls are good to be manual. I'm not in favor of automating everything, by the way. The tone at the top is not going to be an automated control in my lifetime, anyways. Till robots replace everybody, right? So there are some manual controls, but there are controls that are just very difficult to do manually, like segregation of duties. It's not an easy control to eyeball. You can't feel that. You have to really analyze the data, right? Whereas tone at the top, you can feel it. So we looked at the controls framework. We looked at where they had weaknesses. We found that segregation of duties in general and sensitive access and some of the other interfaces and so forth were the challenge. They take all kinds of cash from students, cash management system, how it integrates into their accounting system. So interface fails, IT has privileged access, they go in and fix things, but it makes the auditors very nervous, not to mention the CFO, that what else was changed when somebody fixed that cash edge interface, right? So we looked at that. That was a huge challenge for them. Tracking changes when setups have changed, right? So not only interfaces failing, but universities are pretty dynamic organizations. They get new grants. It's very exciting. They get donations from the big alumni. So all of that creates change in how to set up a new project, let's say, to perform something that's endowed through the grant system, right? So being able to go and look at supplier setups, bank account setups, approval hierarchy, all of those setups are really important to that. And that was all, it was basically not happening. They were taking screenshots, best efforts, but so being able to look at all these changes that are impacting their process and the control activities in the framework that I talked about were creating big risks, and this was getting louder and louder. And funds and grants data, those kind of transactions are hard to monitor. So The solution we came up with was to describe part of what I've described here today, is the ability to set up a automated approach to identify risks in their ERP systems and their higher ed systems that were managing student cash inflows, grants, other endowment items, and then also how that money was spent through projects, project billing, project costing. And so our big success and what the customers, my customer told us, is that they were able to apply some of these techniques that I've shared today with you to become more proactive, right? And there's a lot of value in being proactive. We all know in life that's value, but in business it's very, very important to stay out of the bad news in the media cycles, right? So that's the benefit, right? Not to mention all the savings and ROI and all the other details. They're able to detect, so they can do periodic reviews a lot faster because it's all automated. They can go and look at users' access, not at the abstract role level, but down to the attribute level. So coalescing that against cross-linking that, their provisioning systems, their IAM system, their applications, which are multiple. In higher ed, you don't just run your business on an ERP system, you have a lot of other apps. So being able to get all that certifications done timely and accurately. Identifying risks in the cash entry system, correcting that over or under payments. Changes to configurations are now workflowed. So as soon as the changes occur, they're routed to the right department lead, department head to verify that that's what they requested. You can also tie it to the ticketing system. We integrate with ServiceNow and all the major ticketing system. So whatever's out of your ticketing system that requested that change matches with the information in SafePaaS that tracked the change. So now the reconciliation time has gone down quite a bit. And then, the typical errors that were happening because of the universities also have this nature where they hire a lot of temporary workers, students, so forth. So training is always a challenge, especially when you get to complex ERP systems that are not readily available out there. So errors, misuse, fraud, all those risks went down by a significant number. And if you want to learn more about it, call us and we can share some details to help you build your plan. And then compliance with the big donors and the state and the federal for the grant counts and so forth. We're able to help them build more confidence with their sources of grants and so forth, so that their due diligence process became easier for them. So those are some of the big success items. There are a lot of small things like, just the availability of resources to do more productive stuff. They're not wasting as much time on audits, and audit fatigue goes down, frankly.
Yeah, Adil, I think this case study is a great example because it's a large, complex organization, and they have large sums of money coming into a number of different systems into the university.
Right.
So you've got that information, and in that environment also, a lot of these different colleges that are part of the university, in and of themselves, are very powerful. Right. So there's not a great tendency to want to necessarily share from college to college, department to department. So, right. Just a solution like this can really kind of break down some of those barriers and put in place those safeguards that otherwise would be hard to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, we are at the top of the hour, but I will ask just one quick question, and the others we can answer through email. So I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but so what can we do today to be more proactive? Like now, what can we do now to be more proactive?
Yeah, I mean, it's from a SafePaaS perspective. I mean, it starts basically by thinking about your framework, right? So how are you doing your risk assessment? How are you doing your control activities? And I think if you just even create a simple checklist of those key control environment elements and see how are you doing it today. And if you are reactive and you come to that conclusion, what you can do is plan it out, right? To me, planning is the best way to become proactive. So put together a team, a plan, look at some tools. I mean, SafePaaS is not the only tool. You can start with spreadsheets. We don't mind, but talk to folks like Jeff. These companies have great experience in transforming organizations through their methodology, and we can certainly support Jeff in areas where they're doing that type of work.
Yeah, and I was going to go kind of the same place is really the starting point. In addition to the planning that Adil talked about, we could start with an assessment. We have tools to be able to examine your existing systems and to see how they are set up, and take that information and use that to help inform a best practice approach.
It's a great start. Yep.
Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there today. It's been a fantastic session. A huge thank you to you, Jeff, for joining us today.
Thank you.
A big thank you to you, Adil, as always, and a big thank you to our audience for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. If you would like a further discussion, then we all are here to help you. And if you'd like a copy of the deck, then please reach out to me as well, and I can send that across to you. So a big thank you again to everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.